everyone, welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I make content about gardening and cooking and baking, and I'm just really recording it so I can look back on it and kind of see how far I've come, hopefully quite far over time. And this episode or this video is the recipe book challenge, which is where I basically have a recipe book and I'm trying to fill it out with all the recipes that you kind of save and you keep by over time and then you never actually end up making. So for this challenge, I'm trying to push myself out there this year to really try all the recipes that I've been saving, even if I'm not too sure on them or if they seem a bit tricky or if I just have never gotten around to them. So for this video, we are making English scones, strawberry ones. I know you can say it's scone or scone. I always say scone. And we also make some focaccia bread and a small mini rustic loaf. And we also make some pulled pork kind of tacos. They're really good too. So I hope you enjoy. Most of the food I make, I'm gluten-free and dairy-free for allergies and for dietary requirements. So what I make, I always adjust to be gluten-free and dairy-free. But the recipes I'm following aren't necessarily gluten-free and dairy-free, so I just adjust those. So you don't have to be gluten-free and dairy-free to follow my videos and follow the recipes. The recipes I'm borrowing from other places, so I'll link them below. But if you are gluten-free or dairy-free, I'll show you the adaptations I make to make them more suitable for my diet. So I hope you enjoy. I really appreciate you for being here, and have a good rest of your day, and I hope you enjoy this video. Alright. Okay, so the first thing we're making is the flour focaccia recipe. So for this one, I'm inspired by the Tesco magazine's flour focaccia. So more by how they've kind of made their focaccia and decorated it than their actual recipe. So for the recipe, if you want the normal focaccia recipe, I'll link that below in the description. But for my gluten-free recipe, I'm doing it very similar to how I make my normal bread, but I'm just changing the hydration. So the first thing I'm going to do is warm up some almond milk. If you don't like almond milk, you could use a different type of milk. And then to that I'm adding sugar. I'm going to add 40 grams of sugar. We're making basically a double batch because I'm doing the focaccia and I'm also making a rustic loaf at the same time. Just a small one, but with the excess. And then to that I'm adding yeast. I use active dry yeast. I like to use active dry because I find it hard to find gluten-free instant yeast for a start, and also because I like to be able to check that it's properly rising. And for that we're going to use 20 grams of yeast. And then I'll just set that aside whilst it rises. I usually find that it takes about 10 minutes to rise if it's warmish. So I just cover that back over with the cling film, and the milk is already warm. And then if the radiators are on, I pop it by the radiator, but if not, I just pop it on the side. So the next thing I'm making is these wet ingredients. I'm going to combine the rest of the wet ingredients. So first we need to make our psyllium husk gel. So psyllium husk gel is important if you're new to gluten-free baking because it basically acts as kind of the stickiness and the jelliness that you need, that you would have in normal gluten baking that you don't get with gluten-free baking. So we create it by adding 32 grams of the blonde psyllium husk with 360 grams of milk. I do add the wrong amount of milk at first and then I realise and adjust that. So at first it looks really lumpy. It shouldn't look like that. It should look gel-like. but you'll see when I change it, it changes to a gel-like consistency. At first, when you first mix it, it will just be, it kind of looks like oatmeal, but then eventually it thickens up and it will be gel-like. Psyllium husk, I believe, is just a type of fiber, or it's like a fibrous plant, and it's insoluble fiber, I believe, and that's what makes it almost gum-like. I don't know the ins and outs of it. All I know is that it really helps with gluten-free baking, and it makes it kneadable. It makes it more like a normal bread. So if that's the results that you're trying to achieve, it's quite important to be able to add it. I buy mine on Amazon because it can be quite hard to get your hands on. I have some health stores around me and I've never seen it in the health stores. And I always make sure I buy blonde psyllium husk, because if you buy the normal psyllium husk, it can sometimes turn your breads purple. And if you don't mind purple bread, I think in flour focaccia purple bread would be pretty, actually. Then it would be perfectly fine if you don't mind it. But I would prefer not to have purple bread. So I buy the blonde psyllium husk because I never used to, and I never used to have a problem. I actually used to bleach it with lemon juice and it never had a problem. And then I bought a new batch and that lot every single time was not correct. So once that's all mixed and good, then we're going to add 110 grams of oil. Because this is focaccia bread, I'm using my fancy extra virgin olive oil, which I love. I buy that in TK Maxx, but I think you can buy it online too. And it just adds more depth of flavour, makes it more delicious. And I'm also going to add 1 tablespoon or 2 tablespoons worth of apple cider vinegar. I think I actually used white wine vinegar because I ran out of apple cider vinegar. And then I'm also adding 2 egg whites. The egg whites act like in a bread and act like in a cake or anything, just a binder. The olive oil gives it incredible flavour. And the vinegar I use because it helps the yeast rise more quickly. So I'm going to cover that and set that aside. That doesn't need to do anything now, it's just wet ingredients, but I just don't want it to get any dust or anything in. Next I have out my stand mixer and I'm going to add my flours to it. So for the flours, I use starches because I read the back of the Warburton's bread, gluten-free bread, and I found that to be one of the best ones, and I noticed they always use starches, so I started experimenting with them. So I always use it in this ratio: 220 grams tapioca starch, 180 grams potato starch, and 80 grams cornstarch. I then add a few, however much salt you want. The salt is obviously very delicious in this. And then I add about 3 teaspoons worth of xanthan gum, about 4 teaspoons worth of baking powder, just to give it an extra oomph and extra structure. And that's all the dry ingredients. I combine them. So I know some people are against using xanthan gum, and to be honest, I haven't tried making this bread without it. So I don't know how necessary it is, but I feel like it would be more crumbly without it. But for focaccia, if you're eating it not straight after baking, once it's cooled after baking, but the same day, I think it would be okay. But anyway, I combined all those ingredients together and I made it into I put the focaccia into the pan and then made a small mini loaf with the leftovers. So this is how the mini loaf turned out. And I'll link my gluten-free bread recipe if you just want a normal loaf, a rustic loaf like this. And then I put the focaccia, I let the focaccia rise for an hour, then let it rise in the fridge overnight, and this is how it looked the next day. And it was nice and bubbly. I'll show you the side. And then I brought that I decorated it and then brought it to room temperature. Advice from me would be actually bring it to room temperature first and then decorate it, because it'll be easier to dimple. And then I baked it at 220 degrees Celsius for about 35 minutes, I think it took. So this is it before it went in the oven, after it had come up to room temperature for an hour. And you can see all the decorations I put on it: garlic, tomatoes, and this is it as it came out the oven. So you can see it's nice and golden, and the decorations I think turned out pretty cute. Not perfect, but cute still. Cute enough. And with this I turned it into a couple sandwiches for our dinner. I put it on a towel to let it cool so that I didn't burn anything, and then we made it into sandwiches, and it was delicious. Here's a crumb structure. I did cut it whilst it was a little bit warm because I was starving that night. But here's a bit that I cut after it had cooled a bit more, and you can see it's pretty good structure. So next we're making the scones. So again, these will be gluten-free and dairy-free. So English scones with strawberries and jam. I had these white strawberries. I just have a normal kind of pot of jam here. And we're also going to try and attempt to make some homemade vegan, what's the word I'm looking for? The type of cream. All I can think of is cottage cheese, and that's not what I mean. What's the cream that you put in it? I can't think of the name of the cream, but the cream that you put in scones. So for this, I'm just following BBC Good Food scone recipe. They have a gluten-free scone recipe that you could just use. I do just use the normal scone recipe, and I adapt it slightly just because it made more and it seemed pretty easy to adapt. So I'll link both below if you want to check those out. Clotted cream is the word I was looking for, clotted cream. So you start with 350 grams of self-raising flour. I'm using Dove's Farm gluten-free self-raising flour. Then you want to add a teaspoon of baking powder. Mix that through. Then to it, which isn't in the recipe, unless you're using the gluten-free recipe, is some xanthan gum. So I think I used about half a teaspoon there. Then I'm going to, again, mix that through. And for this recipe, I even brought out my cute strawberry cup and my cow bowl, which I thought was quite cute as well, with the pink rim, to really kind of get into the cute spring spirit. So to that we need to add some butter. I'm using the Stork dairy-free and gluten-free butter. And you want to use 85 grams of butter cut into cubes. I would use a butter that's on the harder side for this. As in, I wouldn't use one that's too low in fats in terms of the dairy-free butters. If you're using normal butter, use whichever normal butter, I'm presuming. I don't know, I never cook with normal butter. But for this, I think the Stork one, is it Trex? The new Flora block butters, kind of block butters would work better because you want to kind of make it into more of a crumbly texture. But again, I don't know because I haven't tried anything else. So I've only made scones a couple of times in my life. And so I enjoy scones, I just never think to make them. Initially I put the butter in and then I realised I forgot to measure it, so I have to take it out and then put it back in again with the scale reset. And you want to cut your butter into cubes as you're adding it. I think scones are just one of those things that make like a spring morning so much more fun. They taste best definitely eaten fresh, but they do keep for a couple of days for sure. And I ate them for breakfast the next following morning and the morning after, and they were really good. So once you got those mixed, you want to crumble it as if you're making like a crumble or a streusel into the flour. So I've cleaned off my hands and then I'm mixing that all through. It does make a bit of a mess, but that's okay. So I kind of went forward, and this is what it looks like after I mixed it for a few minutes. So once that's done, I think we want to get the wet ingredients into my cup. So I have a ml measure on my cup, so I just use that. Oh wait, first we need to add the sugar. Take it back. So we want to add about 3 tablespoons of caster sugar. If you wonder why I keep leaning over, it's because I have my laptop there, so I'm checking the recipe. I just guesstimated the 3 tablespoons of caster sugar, to be honest. And you could add some orange zest or a little juice into the mix instead of milk when we make out the milk mixture, and make it into a flavoured scone as well, and that would be super delicious. Or some dried cherries or raisins, I know are a super popular choice. Lots of options. Cherry scones are some of my favourites though, so dried cherries are definitely a good option. I used to love those as a kid. Okay, so to my cup I'm adding almond milk. I'm adding 175 ml of milk. And I'm just using the scales and changing that to ml. And then once I've done that with that cute cup to match my cute bowl, I was too proud of this. Then once I've done that, I need to add some vanilla. If I had any of my vanilla bean paste, I would have added that, but I only had vanilla essence. So I add about a teaspoon worth. Usually I'm more generous than that with the vanilla, so I'm kind of surprised that's all I did. And then we're basically making it buttermilk because we're adding some lemon to it as well, and it will kind of curdle up, and then we're just going to set that aside for a minute before we add it. I don't know how much lemon it said to add actually. Just said to squeeze lemon juice. It says see tips below, so I clearly didn't see the tips. I just did what I thought. Sometimes I'm not the best at following a recipe. I kind of like to change and adapt them to how I want them. So I'm going to make a well in that bowl, and I add a little bit of the mixture at a time. I do begin mixing with the teaspoon, but I actually did say to mix with the knife, so I do switch to the knife. It said use a cutlery knife, so that's what I did. And then once I mix that through, I add some more of the mixture, the liquid into it. Eventually it gets to the point where I feel like it's really started to come together, so I just start using my hands instead to kind of bring it to a ball. And it was still a little dry, so I did just add the rest of that mixture and then brought it into a ball together. So once it's at this point and it seems like it's all combined, I only had like a drop left, so I just added that to make sure we've got all the bits off the side. And then I lay a layer of tinfoil out and I start rolling it out on that. And I also get a baking tray into the oven and warming up as advised by the recipe. And I had the oven at 200 degrees C for a fan oven. So I just pop it on some foil I just press it out on my hands, and I'm making pretty teeny tiny scones because I'm just having small kind of scones as snacks, so you can make it thicker and with a bigger cutter, but I'm making mine pretty small. So I'm just pressing it out. You could roll it out, I'm sure, with a rolling pin, but I'm just using my hands. And then I have this small cutter here. You are meant to use a smooth edge, but I didn't have a smooth edge, so I just used this. I popped it over some flour, and then I cut them out. And that's how they turned out. So I'm just going to cut the rest of those out. And then with the leftover, I kind of just crush it into a ball and try to bring them together into a scone. These ones did really crumble apart, to be fair, but it's best to use them than not to use them. And we don't want any waste, so. So once I had them all made up, I just pop them onto the baking tray. And then you also want to give them an egg wash. So I just mix up an egg and egg wash them as well. And then whilst they're baking, we make our, oh gosh, I've forgotten the word again. Let me check. What is it called? Clotted cream. So whilst I've got them in the oven, they only go in the oven for about 10 minutes, I attempt to make this clotted cream. This is my first time ever trying to make clotted cream. And to be honest, I don't know if I did something wrong. I will link the recipe. I probably did something wrong because I wasn't really paying that much attention because I didn't have long whilst they were in the oven, and I needed to get this done whilst they were in the oven because I had work later on in the evening, so I didn't have much time to spare. But this clotted cream didn't really turn out like clotted cream, I would say. It was more on the liquidy side of things. It was, a bit too liquidy. It wasn't like clotted cream, I would say. So I don't know, maybe in the future I will attempt to try one of the other recipes or retry this recipe. And I also did use a hand mixer because it said you could just whisk it by hand, and I definitely wouldn't recommend that. I would definitely say at least use like an electric hand mixer because whisking it by hand was really difficult. And that's probably half the reason it didn't turn out, to be honest with you. I didn't measure the icing sugar here. Like I said, I was in a bit of a rush. But the recipe said to mix it until it's light and fluffy, so that's what I attempted to do. And then you add in the cream and whisk that too. Let me tell you, I was mixing this cream for some time and it was not thickening easy. This cream does thicken up. I think you just need an electric mixer. It was just, I had to go and my boyfriend had to go. It was just a disaster, but eventually I got it to as thick as I could get it, and I just called that good. So once the scones come out of the oven, I get everything ready. So I have this attempt at clotted cream. So I clean up and I get the scones out. The first one I picked up was one of the really crumbly ones, and I do cut a few up. But you can see this is one of the ones that I just threw together at the end. So I grab another one instead that's more kind of solid. And I did break it at the end, but that's okay. And then I decide, you know what, I'm going to do one more. So I pick another one up. And these were still pretty warm at this point. And then I pop on the side. I grab one of my cute white strawberries that I got, chop off the top of that and cut that into pieces. And then I also add some of my strawberry jam and some of the clotted cream. So once I layer it up and assemble it, I give it a try, and it was absolutely delicious. And the clotted cream did taste good. It just wasn't like clotted cream, but it did taste good, so that was good. And here's me taking a bite out of it. And then lastly, I made the pulled pork. I don't have much of this because I think I forgot to record the first part, but I'll link the recipe below. But I assembled all the pork together. It was pretty simple. And then I made some pickled onion with a red onion and some lemon like the recipe said to do. So I just sliced up the onion and added some lemon juice, and that was pretty much it, and some salt and pepper. And then I set that aside for, I think, about an hour. And then here was the pork coming out of the oven. I was surprised how much it burned my pot. That took a while to clean. And I did make up some beans as well. And here's the pork once it was all shredded. Here's what some of the fat like that was left over. And that turned out delicious too. My boyfriend especially loved it. Okay, so if you're new here, these are some of the clippings of magazines and printouts that I have saved, namely the Tesco magazine. And these are two of them that we used this week. And then the scones recipe I got from online. So I'm just going to write them up into this book now. So this is how the book looks. It's really pretty. I got it in a charity shop. And super simple. So first of all, let's start with the focaccia bread. So would you say that's more soup, fish, meat and poultry, vegetable salad, or desserts? I think soups will be the hardest section for me to fill out. So I think I'll put it with soups just because you can serve it with soup. Because soups, I don't have that many soup recipes. This is one that it came with from the charity shop, and then this is one that I added. So let's start with this, and then this is my notes for how I did my recipe. So I'll just start by writing that out. So let's start with flour, focaccia. So I ended up enjoying all of these recipes, and I wrote all of these ones out. So that's a success, and the book is slowly filling out, which is great. So I just want to say I really appreciate you watching and getting to the end of the video. If you have any advice or questions, let me know, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. So thank you. Bye.